to the GOAT Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Neander, with you here on this chilly Saturday morning here before Week 10. All right, so we've got the second half of our Week 10 preview show coming up here. We had some different news and notes, so make sure you're keeping an eye on all the injury reports. There are some guys that were, kind of on the fence that some news is coming out about, so make sure, on top of all the buys this week, there are some injury questions. There are some guys that are game time decisions, so make sure you're keeping an eye on all that moving through today into tomorrow morning. But we're going to start today in Tampa Bay, where the Arizona Cardinals are visiting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and this is expected to be one of the higher scoring games of the weekend, so the fantasy players should be scoring all over this game, you hope. Or in Tampa Bay's case, might just be a couple of them scoring an absolute ton of points, which seems to be the way the Buccaneers are rolling lately. But let's break this down a little bit and see who we're going to play in this game. A lot of people have Jameis Winston as one of the better plays of the week, and I absolutely agree. The Tampa Bay the Arizona Cardinals defense has been just really awful at holding down opposing quarterbacks and receivers. They've been giving up tons of points, and with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense playing as good as well as it has lately, much better than the beginning of the year. The feeling is that they are definitely going to put up a good amount of points, and I think the biggest question is, will and can Arizona kind of keep up with the points that we expect Tampa to put up? I'm not really quite sure. Arizona's also looked pretty decent here. So let's talk about who we're playing and who we're not. On the road today, so are you playing Kyler Murray? I think he's a good play. I think that the rushing yards are going to come into play here. I don't know that I would be expecting, a top 6 finish out of Kyler Murray, but I do think that a QB1 finish is very, very likely somewhere in that 7 to 12 range. And I think you're going to be okay with playing Kyler Murray. I'm not too worried about it. Now, the running game here, this is pretty interesting. It does sound like David Johnson's going to be ready to go. Cliff Kingsbury definitely makes it sound like he's going to be out there. And, David Johnson every week makes it sound like he's going to be out there. So I wouldn't really trust his word on it. But as far as it goes, I do think that David Johnson will be out there, and assuming he is active and mostly healthy, I definitely think you're playing David Johnson. I think the bigger question for everyone is Kenyon Drake. After the breakout game, with the new team last week with Arizona, obviously David Johnson was out of that game, so was Chase Edmonds. So the question here is, what role will be carved out for Kenyon Drake? The real question is what does your team look like this week with all the buys, right? I don't have Kenyon Drake as a strong play this week. I do think he'll get some work. I think he'll touch the ball, maybe 8 times, maybe 10 times, combined between rushing the ball and catching the ball. But I don't think he's going to have a really big game. There's always a chance he gets into the end zone. I'd be a little bit nervous about starting Kenyon Drake in this game on the road against a pretty decent defense. I don't know. I probably wouldn't start Kenyon Drake this week. So I know he had the huge week. For me, not that I wish anybody was hurt ever, but I would love to see Kenyon Drake get another week in this offense by himself to see what he can do and maybe solidify a little bit more work. As that goes, I don't think that's going to happen that way. You're going to see a pretty good dose of David Johnson with a spattering of Kenyon Drake. So if you're really in a bind and you have to play Kenyon Drake, I think that you can. I just wouldn't be looking forward to doing it. Let's see, Arizona Cardinals pass catching options. So, in theory, the most consistent play has been Larry Fitzgerald, especially, to start the year. It's like they didn't use him at all. They looked terrible. They started going to Larry Fitzgerald. The offense looked better, started rolling a little bit. And now once they got a little head of steam going, they seem to have forgotten about Larry Fitzgerald. So in this game, I'm not really sure if I can play Larry Fitzgerald. I don't have him ranked in the top 36 wide receivers this week, so I don't even have him as a wide receiver 3, and I think you want to flex away from him. I do think, however, that Christian Kirk is very playable. He is in my wide receiver 3 category, and a lot of that's based on the targets he's been getting lately. The target share has been going back up with him back on the field, and I think you want to have Christian Kirk out there in your lineup, and I think you should be expecting another, very probably 10-plus target kind of a game for him. We'll see what he does with it, but I think you want him out there. Your Buccaneers, man. So let's see what we got going on here. As I mentioned, Jameis Winston, we know you're going to play him. I do think this week is a week to play Jameis Winston. The interceptions could always be there, one or two of them, but I feel like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns is a extremely makeable bar for Jameis Winston this week, maybe even over that. So definitely play Jameis Winston in the backfield. It looks like Ronald Jones has usurped once again the starting role here in Tampa. And this is a big, good lesson for fantasy players, right? Is you don't want to only remember what happened, even if it was recent, if something more recent has happened. So, we look at the roller coaster of Ronald Jones in his very short career, kind of highly touted out of college, got drafted pretty highly. Comes out, looks awful in preseason and looks awful in training camps. Everyone's talking about how bad he looks. He comes out and every opportunity he has, he looked terrible last year. I think it was under 2 yards a carry last year. It was, really awful. So, fast forward. He starts to look better into preseason. He's showing some moves. He's showing things that we didn't see last year. So you start the season thinking that, hey, maybe he's got the job back. No. It's Peyton Barber for a couple of games. And then Ronald Jones for a couple of games. And then it's Peyton Barber. Then it's a split backfield. All this has happened over the course of 10 games for the Buccaneers. But in the last 2 games, we see Ronald Jones really not only getting the workload, but actually doing something with it. And that's the important thing for Bruce Arians. I think right now this offense is headed in the best direction they have been all season. And a part of that is, everything coming together, and that includes Ronald Jones as the featured back. So, now that being said, I don't have him as some really high play. I have him at the very low end of the running back 2 tier. But if you're a top 25 running back in a week where there are 6 teams on a bye, I do think that makes you most likely you're going to play this guy. So I expect people to be playing Ronald Jones, and I think that's the right move. Peyton Barber not only should not be in your lineup, I don't think he has a spot on your roster anymore. There are more important handcuffs. There's more important things to look at here moving into these last few weeks of the regular season. Now, of course, if something happened to Ronald Jones or the script gets flipped and all of a sudden it's just Peyton Barber again for no reason, then hey, I'll go ahead and say I was wrong. But I definitely think that Ronald Jones is the back to roster. You're going to go forward with him. Buccaneers receivers have a chance to go ham this week. Expect big games out of Mike Evans. Expect big games out of Chris Godwin. Now, what's the share going to be like? Who knows? It could be another game where Evans has 13 for 200 and 2 TDs, and Godwin only gets 5 for 60. Or it could be a little bit more balanced. I'd like to see them find that balance. I think they're going to be most dangerous when teams, aren't focused or can't focus on one of the receiving options. I'd love to see 10 targets for each of these guys, for Godwin and Evans. And I do think it's going to be a little bit more of a balanced game in the sense that I think both receivers are going to have big games this week. Let's talk about tight end here because I'm not looking at playing third receiver options for the Buccaneers this week as any more than like a huge dart throw. I mean, I know they've got Brashad Perryman, who's had a couple of decent games, and that's all right. I understand if you're looking at him, but he's not there yet for me. At tight end, so Cameron Brate is healthy. O.J. Howard is healthy. Which one do you play, says you? No one, says me. I don't play any of these guys. And you'll have to remember what I just said about not remembering what happened too recently in fantasy. But at the same time, you just can't forget everything. O.J. Howard has been, atrocious this season for fantasy owners and just, as a receiving tight end. Maybe the coaching staff and Bruce Arians is happy with his blocking, and that's great and all. But as far as catching the ball, he's been out on the field a lot. He runs a lot of routes, and they just don't throw to the tight end. I just don't see that changing this week just because O.J. Howard is now healthy. I think that Howard and Brate alike are both touchdown-dependent dart throws that you don't need to make. There are other guys out there that we're seeing come up. Jacob Hollister, Blake Jarwin caught a touchdown pass this last week. He could be someone that you look at. There's other guys out there that I think you can pick up and don't have to put yourself through the continued agony of owning O.J. Howard. So a lot of people are going to pick up O.J. Howard. A lot of people are going to play him. It could be the right call, absolutely. I don't think it is. So we're going to move on from that game to a game that's a little less exciting for fantasy purposes, but both these teams have been, valuable for fantasy. We've got the Miami Dolphins traveling to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. And, the Dolphins, hey, are becoming fantasy relevant, right? I mean, this is something that we're talking about. Fantasy wide receivers have become relevant for the Dolphins. The tight end Gesicki's all of a sudden, showing out. So what does that mean? Well, against this Colts defense, I'm not super excited about playing, Ryan Fitzpatrick. I'm okay with him as a streaming option if you need him, but I'd have him as probably my number 4, streaming option quarterback for this week behind a few other guys. And I just don't think that it's a great matchup after losing Preston Williams last week, their wide receiver, without Kenyon Drake. I just think that, there's a position here that Fitzpatrick could have one of those games on the road where he really kills you and scores, negative points. That could happen. I don't see that happening. Just saying. We all know with Fitzpatrick it's a possibility. And this is just one of those games I'd probably avoid Ryan Fitzpatrick. Looking at the backfield, so Mark Wilson, is that his name? Yeah, he's gone. He's suspended for 4 weeks. We have Kenyon Drake now in Arizona. So is it the Kalen Ballage show? I'm not really sure, honestly. We know that Kalen Ballage is going to get a decent amount of the work, but he hasn't looked, he really hasn't looked great in a lot of those carries. So I'm not going to just trust that he's going to get all the work as the number 1. At the end of the day, that they're going to have more running backs on their team, right? I mean, we know that. So you can't just assume that Ballage is going to get all the work. There's going to be other running backs on the squad. They're going to be either, promoted from the practice squad or, whatever's going to happen. And all you need to know is that, Ballage is not someone I want to play. Let's put it to you that way, okay? I am not looking at playing Kalen Ballage this week. I want to see him as the number 1 running back before I'd be willing to just go ahead and play him. But you should roster him. Kalen Ballage very well could be the number 1 running back and might be a guy that kind of anchors your team into and through the fantasy playoffs. I know that sounds crazy, but really, he's a possibly number 1 running back on this team. So you got to look out for it. If it's not him, it might be Myles Gaskin. We haven't really seen much of him yet, but if he gets on the field and hits fire, then it might just turn into him. So as I did mention, unfortunately, Preston Williams, the impressive rookie receiver, did tear his ACL. He is out for the season. Definitely a big hit, not only for him, as he was looking great and really having a fantastic rookie campaign. Just stinks for the Dolphins in general, for Ryan Fitzpatrick. They're trying to get a little something going. They've got the passing game working a little bit with Williams and Devontae Parker. And now Williams goes out. So how's that going to affect the rest of the receiving options? I don't think it gives much of a bump to Devontae Parker. I think he's out there doing his thing. He's getting his targets. And I still think Devontae Parker is a very solid and good, flex play. I know people for years have been, shied away from Devontae Parker, but the fact is, Ryan Fitzpatrick makes his receivers better for fantasy. That's all there is to it. He does it with Adam Humphries, and he does it with Chris Godwin. He does it with, guys, everywhere he goes, he turns them into point scorers while he's out on the field. So I do think you want to play Devontae Parker. Unfortunately, I'm not ready to play any of these other Dolphins receivers as they move up, and try to take some of this work. You've got Jakeem Grant, you've got Albert Wilson, you've got Allen Hurns. I don't think any of them get a big bump up. I think the biggest possible bump is Mike Gesicki. So he did have his biggest game last week. I think it was 6 for 95 yards. And looking to build off of that now, there's more of these big body, middle of the field targets that are going to be open with Preston Williams gone. So I think Mike Gesicki is a good play this week. I know he's going to be a popular waiver wire pickup because of the big game last week. But if you're asking me, am I playing O.J. Howard or Mike Gesicki? I'm playing Mike Gesicki. So there you go. That's just the truth. Let's talk about the Colts here. The big question, right now is Jacoby Brissett, right? How's he looking? What's his health like? It's hard to tell. Right now, it sounded like it was going to be a game time decision the last I heard. And until I hear something else, I don't know that, I want to go ahead a different direction from that. I mean, his backup is Brian Hoyer, who looked pretty good last week, and they are playing against the Dolphins. So I understand that, you know, the idea is everybody that plays the Dolphins, you go ahead and you just play them. That's fine, but for me, with Brissett's knee issues, I'd be fine with playing some of the other Colts that are going to get work regardless. But I don't really want to play Jacoby Brissett with an if factor. You need to go out right now and get your quarterback. If it's not Brian Hoyer, get somebody. But I think Hoyer could be fine against Miami this week. So I'd be fine playing whichever Indianapolis Colt quarterback is going to be playing in this game. Even with T.Y. Hilton out, I think it's a fine play. Marlon Mack should get plenty of opportunities this week, so feel good about Marlon Mack. And who are we starting here, for wide receivers? I don't know if I'm starting many, if any. I know Zach Pascal has kind of come up big lately, and he might be the guy to play. I have him outside of my top 36, so I don't really have him as a wide receiver 3 play. But, hey, they've got to throw the ball to somebody. They're going to be out there, right? So why not Zach Pascal? I assume he's a better option than Chester Rogers is. I'd be okay playing, the tight end combo here if you're in tight end limbo and been streaming every week like I have been in most of my leagues. I think you can play Jack Doyle for a nice floor of 4 or 5 catches, and I think you play Eric Ebron with good upside and that red zone target potential. So I'd probably have both my Indianapolis Colts tight ends out there, assuming I didn't really have a lot of other options, right? So that's always the caveat, right? It's always about what are your options. If you have options, what are they? If you don't have options, Jack Doyle might be the way to go, right? All right, let's go to what I think is one of the more interesting games of the week. Afternoon game, we've got the Carolina Panthers visiting the Green Bay Packers. 2 of the top scoring fantasy running backs in the league are in this game. And for the Carolina Panthers, so we know that Cam is out. Kyle Allen has the job. Cam has been shut down for the rest of the year, and most people, myself included, believe that his Carolina career is over and that we're going to see Cam Newton on a different team next year. It's going to be a lot of fun to speculate to see where he might go. But for now, let's just assume he's not going to be with the Panthers. But that does nothing for us right now, right? We're playing fantasy football in 2019, so we need to know what Kyle Allen's going to do. I don't want to play Kyle Allen this week on the road. Probably going to be a pretty cold game here because, this cold front is kind of snapping in. And, Green Bay secondary is still pretty strong, and their pass rush is still pretty strong. So I think that the Carolina Panthers are going to try to slow this game down, keep the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands as much as possible, and get the C-Mac, the Christian McCaffrey train rolling as often and as hard as they can. So, not that you didn't know this, but Christian McCaffrey owners, I think you're in line for a big workload this week. It might not turn out to be one of his huge games, but I think you're going to get a big workload, and it's still going to be a nice, pretty easy 20-plus point performance out of Christian McCaffrey. I think what's more interesting are the receiving options for Carolina, and more than likely you're in a position where you're definitely thinking about playing some of these guys. I know I am. DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel. What are you thinking about these guys? For me, if I had one to pick out of the 2, I'd be playing DJ Moore for the consistency of the targets, right? He hasn't been making any big plays down the field. The touchdowns aren't there, but the catches are there, right? 45 receptions, through 8 games. It's 5 to 6 catches every game, at least. A couple games there kind of disappeared, so most games it's more than that. And you feel good about getting those 11, 12 points out of DJ Moore, almost every week, if not more. Curtis Samuel's a little bit more of a boomer bust player, kind of getting, a fewer targets than DJ Moore is, it seems like. They are typically higher value targets, a little bit more down the field, a little bit more big play opportunity, but there is definitely, issues here, and, Curtis Samuel is, on the top end of my wide receiver 3 rankings, so in the 27, 26 range on the week, and I think that makes him a very strong candidate to play. A lot of you, myself included, have a lot of these guys that you're looking at, right, for your flex this week. It could be a Curtis Samuel, it could be a Sammy Watkins, a Devin Singletary, it could be a Zach Pascal, right? And I think for me, Curtis Samuel would move a little bit further down my typical, list of players to play just because of the Packers secondary and how decent they have been. And I do think this is going to be a game where the ball is going to stay on the ground a little bit more than maybe it has recently with the Panthers. So, it's all about caution. I think you want to play DJ Moore, and I probably wouldn't play Curtis Samuel if I had better options. And again, I'm still on the fence in a couple of my leagues. You still might see Curtis Samuel in one or two of my lineups. I just won't be thrilled about it. I'll be waiting to see what happens. Both tight ends in this game, I don't want. Greg Olsen just hasn't happened. And with Kyle Allen now the full-time starter, I think you can go ahead and assume it's not going to happen most weeks for him. They just haven't had that connection that he has with Cam Newton, and he doesn't have the physical abilities that he's had in his career. He's just getting older, and injuries have been piling up, and he just doesn't seem to be open that often. So I want to stay away from Greg Olsen if I can. Let's talk about the Packers. So, pretty humbling defeat last week for the Green Bay Packers. They were on a roll at 7-1 and went in to face the LA Chargers in a game where a lot of people thought they should win. I want to say pretty handily, not beat them up or anything or embarrass them, but I think most people thought the Packers would win that game with some room to spare. And they looked awful. I mean, the Chargers absolutely dominated the Packers offense. They could not get anything going through the air or on the ground for over 3 quarters. It wasn't until the 4th quarter where they started to put, a few drives together. But it was looking pretty bad. I expect them to really make it a focus to get back on track this week, offensively specifically. And I think that the game plan is going to be really smart this week. You're going to see more Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams out of the backfield catching the ball, which has been, I think, their most valuable weapon, to date this year. I do think that when you see Aaron Jones getting out of the backfield and Jamal Williams, they're making plays happen. Defenses are having trouble, guarding them. So, hey, I keep that going. So with that in mind, I expect Aaron Jones to have another big week. He's had many of them this year. I expect him to have another big week. But I do also expect Jamal Williams to be usable as a flex. I have him right in the middle of my running back 3 kind of rankings, close to number 30. But I do think that puts him in a good play position for you. He's been finding the end zone left and right. And a guy that's in the end zone that often, it's just hard to not put out on the field, right? So there you go. I think you want to get both those running backs out there this week, and we'll see what happens there. Let's talk about receiving options. So Devontae Adams finally healthy. It looks like he is off of the injury report. Looks like he is good to go. Devontae Adams owners rejoice. We needed this so bad. I needed this so bad. I mean, I got a couple teams that have been just scraping by waiting for Adams to come back and to be Devontae Adams in this offense, right? You expect the touchdowns, if nothing else. The guy's been a touchdown machine with Aaron Rodgers, and I know I'm ready for this to get back on track. I think this is a big Devontae Adams game, not a huge monstrous 40-plus point game, but I'd be surprised if they don't really make an effort to get him very heavily involved right from the get-go. I think you need to be looking out for that. Devontae Adams, big game coming. Because of Devontae Adams coming back and because of the expected work I think that the running backs will get in the pass game, I don't want to recommend any other Green Bay Packers to play on the offensive side. Playing Rodgers, Jones, Williams, and Devontae Adams, the core 4 right now, and for me, that's about it. Marcus Valdez-Scantling just hasn't done enough, doesn't have the ball skills in my opinion. Geronimo Allison disappears way too often, and Alan Lazard is going to go back to being good when he catches the ball, when he gets opportunities, but the opportunities just are not going to be there for Lazard, in my opinion. So I'm going ahead and I'm pivoting away from him. He was a nice play for a few weeks, and I think if they're smart, they'll think about making him the number 2 across from Devontae Adams next season, or as soon as possible. But, for right now, I think that is what it is. Then we have Jimmy Graham again. I already mentioned I don't want to play either of the tight ends in this game. This is the it's so weird with tight ends this year, right? It's just crazy how we're thinking about playing. In 2019, we're still weekly thinking about, do I play Jason Witten, Tyler Eifert, Greg Olsen, Jordan Reed all year? I mean, it's just pretty wild, man. It's like the dinosaur land for tight ends. You have all this young talent out there, guys getting drafted early, and they're all out there, right? I mean, the Will Disleys and Vance McDonald's, Trey Burtons, and a lot of them aren't really doing a whole lot. So it's been interesting to say the least with the tight end landscape. It has been absolutely crazy. And let me tell you, I mean, as much as I don't think it's worth it in a lot of ways to use a second or third round draft pick on, one of these top tight ends, I might just do it next year and just set it and forget it. I mean, I guess there's value in that convenience and in that safe feeling of saying, okay, I have not only a very good tight end, but I have an advantage at this position on a weekly basis. And I don't have to, get mired in this muck of tight end waiver wire streaming, which stinks, man. I'm telling you, I've always been a draft tight end late, punt tight end kind of a guy. And these last couple of seasons, it has been an endurance trial going through the season, trying to piece together tight end one by one. I mean, in some of my leagues this year, I've played 5 or 6 different tight ends this season. Just what it is. It is what it is, but there's good and bad with both strategies. You can have a great team either way, but I am fully thinking about changing my strategy for next year, man. I don't know. I still don't think any of those tight ends have proven that they've been worth it this year. I don't think if you paid a late first round or an early second round pick for Kelsey, it's been worth it. I don't think if you paid an early to mid third round pick for Ertz or Kittle, that it's really been worth it compared to who you could have drafted. But hey, what do I know? I don't have any of those guys. So, all right. Let's keep it rolling here. Our last 4 o'clock game. We've got the Los Angeles Rams traveling to Pittsburgh. Pretty interesting road game taking on the Steelers here. I'm really curious about this game. A little bit lower over-under than I might have thought. It's a 43.5 over-under. I guess that makes sense. Steelers team's been playing pretty well. They are at home. The Rams offense hasn't been in sync all season. So I guess I do understand. Excuse me. I'm getting a little sniffly here with this weather dropping here, so I can feel it right now. I can feel it. So, Los Angeles Rams going to be without Brandon Cooks again this week. I mean, it definitely affects the team. Definitely affects the other weapons here. So, who are we playing? Who are we not playing? Jared Goff is one of those huge question marks this week. So, where do I have him? I have him outside of QB1. So, which means that even with all those QBs on a bye, I still have him outside of QB1. Which means I don't think you should play Jared Goff. You may have to. That's very possible. But I don't really think you should play him. I think he's just in line for another mediocre at best game, and you're going to be disappointed. So there you go. I don't really want to play him. Moving into the backfield, Coach Sean McVay said that Malcolm Brown, the formerly second-string running back, seems to be good to go and we're back in. And this only muddies the water even more for Todd Gurley owners. So I think Darrell Henderson is still, you can keep him as the handcuff if you're a Gurley owner, but I don't think Henderson has playing value now with Malcolm Brown back. And I don't think that Malcolm Brown has playing value with Darrell Henderson getting a little bit of work and Todd Gurley being pretty much healthy all year so far. I don't think Malcolm Brown has, any playability either. So let's talk about Todd Gurley's value this week and kind of moving forward. It definitely takes a hit. He hasn't been great this season, but he hasn't been that bad. He's just been consistent with these decent games, and that's put him up there in a decent spot for the whole season. But by no means has he been, killing it by any means. He's just playing okay. So throughout the first 9 weeks, can we find him? We have Todd Gurley as the running back number 25. Now, he's only played 7 games, so they did have a bye. He did miss a game with injury. So, 14.1 points per game in fantasy would put him closer to the number 20 back as opposed to the number 25. Now, is that what you were hoping when you drafted Todd Gurley, running back 20 or 25? I don't think so. So, I think we do have to say he's been a little bit disappointing. But again, that 14 points per game, it's not like you're getting nothing and you're not having these, boom games. You're not having these bust games. It's been pretty steady Eddie. So there's something to be said for that. There's some enjoyment to get out of a guy that, is just scoring enough points for you and you're pretty happy with it. So There you go. Let's talk about Rams receivers. Cooper Kupp, baby. Keep it going, Cooper Kupp. I know you're going to be out there for everybody, expecting another, solid, if not very, very good game from Cooper Kupp. Robert Woods, the big question mark. So, the hope was, at least for Robert Woods owners, that without Brandon Cooks in the lineup, there'd be more targets there. Didn't really seem to work out that way necessarily for Robert Woods last week. He only had a couple of targets, which was crazy to me, especially the kind of game that Cooper Kupp had. So, what do we do with Robert Woods this week? You may have to play him because of all the receivers on bye, but I do have him in a league where I'm sitting in. So I have him in one league where I'm playing. I think it's Michael Gallup over him, and I just don't expect it to be a big week for Robert Woods. Now, one or two things, could happen here. He could have, the regular Robert Woods game that we were hoping for all year that he's had a lot of, right? 7 catches for 70 yards and no touchdowns, right? And if you play him and he has 7 for 70, you'll probably be pretty happy with that this year, the way it's been going. He could have, another 13 reception game on 17 or 18 targets for 100 yards and maybe still not get in the end zone. But he could have one of those games where, the volume is out of control and they really kind of force feed him all game long. I'm not sure what it's going to be. I just don't really trust Robert Woods right now going forward, so we'll have to see what happens there. Josh Reynolds, are you picking him up and playing him? I think you can. I don't see why you couldn't play Josh Reynolds. He's getting the targets out there. He's getting more targets than Robert Woods when he's out on the field. So I think Josh Reynolds could be a sneaky flex play for you. And I probably would say go ahead and play him and maybe expect that he might hit that 12-plus point plateau. I think he's going to be a part of the offense this week, and I think he's absolutely playable. So is Gerald Everett. I know he had an off week, but this guy is a big play kind of tight end. I think without Brandon Cooks in there, Jared Goff will be looking for anybody to make the big play. And I think this week is going to be Gerald Everett. So put me down for Gerald Everett having a big game. I'm calling 15 points at least for Gerald Everett. I think he's going to have a nice one. All right. Let's move over to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are having some injury issues here in Pittsburgh. So you got Mason Rudolph playing quarterback. I don't want to play Mason Rudolph. He's not streamable for me, and I'm going to stay away from him this week. James Conner is out. Benny Snell Jr. is out. So that means it's the Jalen Samuel show. It's the Jalen show. It's the Jalen show. So we'll see what happens. Jalen Samuel is going to have a lot of work this week. He'll get, a lot of the groundwork. We did see, him coming in last week and giving some, carries away. But you also saw the receiving work. And, 13 receptions out of the backfield is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, that is a serious number. So Jalen Samuels is a big play. He's a good play this week. Play him with confidence. Get those points. Other than that, I don't want to play any Pittsburgh Steelers. So I'm going to make this very easy for you. The only Pittsburgh Steeler I want in my lineup this week is Jalen Samuels. I understand that they're going to throw the ball some and someone's got to catch the ball. That happens in every game. Juju Smith-Schuster is questionable. I'm not sure if he's going to play. I would lean towards him playing, but I would lean towards him being very good. And then you have Deontay Johnson and James Washington. I don't want to play any of these guys. Vance McDonald finally got, a little bit going last week, but I'm still staying away from Vance McDonald. So even in a home game for Pittsburgh, the only Steeler I want to start is Jalen Samuels. So I'm going to go ahead, and that's going to be my advice for you. All right, let's move to some of these night games here. Let's see, who's playing in the Sunday night game? I believe that's Minnesota and Dallas? Yeah, Minnesota is visiting the Dallas Cowboys. Awesome night games this week, man. Both the Sunday night and the Monday night game are going to be awesome. The Thursday night game turned out to be exciting. So, hey, good job, NFL. Good job picking these games for the primetime games. I'm excited about that. So, there we go. The Minnesota Vikings, who you playing? Kirk Cousins, man, he's a hard one. He's a hard one, this one on the road. I think it's going to be a huge dose of Dalvin Cook, and I think that Kirk Cousins winds up outside of the quarterback one range, so not sure if I'm playing him there. Dalvin Cook, obviously you're playing him. I expect a big game from Dalvin Cook, so feel good about that. Alexander Madison, he's had a little bit of value on his own. You can play him Without Dalvin Cook being injured, you can play Alexander Madison, but they seem to be going away a little bit more from him, kind of focusing on Dalvin Cook as we get into these big games near the end of the year. So I'd keep Alexander Madison on my bench for now, and go ahead and just keep Cook rolling. The big question is, what receivers do you start for Minnesota? And I think you got to start Stephon Diggs. I know it's getting pretty terrifying to start Stephon Diggs. You don't know if he's going to have one of those weeks that absolutely kills you. But with Adam Thielen out, I think you got to start Stephon Diggs. He might have that huge week, and you don't want to miss out on it. So I assume you're going to have him in your lineup. There you go. Tight ends, man, they're coming on, and I think that as a decent floor with a low ceiling, Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith are becoming kind of playable. So we'll see what happens there. All right, so yeah, I think these guys are I think you could use either of the Minnesota tight ends, but you're probably not going to. Keep an eye on it, though. Irv Smith seems to be flashing that big playability, so there you go. In Dallas, man, I think you're playing most of your Cowboys here, so let's just go through. Dak Prescott, I think you're definitely playing him. Expect a solid week from Dak, even against a decent Minnesota defense. Zeke's going to be Zeke. He'll get the ball plenty. He'll put up some points for you. So let's go to the receivers. This is where the questions start. Amari Cooper is questionable. I don't think Amari Cooper is going to be valuable in this game, whether or not he winds up playing. I do think it's possible he gets on the field. I just think he's not going to be healthy enough to really make a huge difference. So I do think that gives a bump up to basically everybody else. Michael Gallup, I think, becomes a must-play. I think Jason Witten gets a little bump and becomes, definitely a tight end one, and maybe winds up in that top 7, top 8 tight ends. So keep an eye out for that for the Dallas Cowboys. Are there other Cowboys I want to play? Maybe Randall Cobb as a PPR guy. I don't want to. He's been getting more work lately, getting more targets, but I don't think I really want to go Randall Cobb right now. So I'm going Michael Gallup and Jason Witten as the pass-catching options you want to play for the Cowboys. All right, Monday night. Big divisional matchup on Monday night. The Seattle Seahawks at 7-2 travel to San Francisco, take on the undefeated 49ers. Man, so what's going to happen here? So we got battle of great offense that's rolling in Seattle against a great defense that's pretty much been dominating in San Fran. I don't think one is necessarily going to win, but I do think Seattle will be able to run their offense and score some points. So with that being said, play Russell Wilson, play Chris Carson, play Tyler Lockett, and yes, play DK Metcalf. The time has come this year where DK Metcalf is getting enough targets and enough work to be considered the number 2 guy. Yes, Josh Gordon is making his debut. They do have some similarities in their skill set, but I feel great about playing him. Go ahead. I do want to pump the brakes a little bit on Jacob Hollister. He had a great week last week, a couple of touchdowns, and yes, he's taking over for Will Dissly, who also had some really good performances early in the year and looked really good. But I'm not ready to throw in Jacob Hollister just yet. I want to see it for one more week, but you could throw him in there this week and maybe you get that big payoff like you did last week. In San Fran, listen, Seattle's defense has not been as good as they were in the past. They're not the Legion of Boom. They're not those guys. And they're on the road. So I think the 49ers will also be able to get their offense going here. It's an over-under of 47. I expect it to go over. So I think Jimmy Garoppolo is definitely a quarterback you want in. It's hard to even call him a streamer at this point because I think he's rostered in a lot of leagues. But I do think that if you have the option, you play Jimmy G. I'm actually playing him over Jared Goff in one of my leagues, and I feel pretty good about that. With the running back, so I put my foot in my mouth the last preview shows from last week, and I said you can play any two 49ers running backs as long as it's the top 2 and they're healthy. You can go ahead and play them. And it didn't work out that way last week. It was a tough game. It was their first game where the rushing attack didn't really, dominate. And, luckily for them, the passing game did. Garoppolo threw 3 touchdowns, and Emmanuel Sanders looked great. So the question is, now that they have more of a passing game with Emmanuel Sanders, is this going to be a trend here? I'm really not sure. I think they're going to try to get the running game going here at home. So I think that you have to play Tevin Coleman. You got to have him in your lineup. And Matt Breida's right on the edge for me. Matt Breida's a hard one to call. I'm not sure if you're going to play Matt Breida, and I'm not sure if I would either. I'm just being honest. It's a hard one to call. It's a coin flip for me. It would depend on who else I'm looking at. But you can play Matt Breida. Just my expectations are tempered here. I think Tevin Coleman's going to be the back to play in this game. So of course you want to play Emmanuel Sanders. He's been going off with his new team. He looks great in this offense. He looks great with Jimmy Garoppolo, and I know he's happy to have him there. Other than that, I'm not playing any other wide receivers for San Francisco. The question here is now all of a sudden George Kittle, is on the injury report. He's come out saying that there's some stuff going on in there, and I don't like the way that sounds. So, man, the big question is, it's a Monday night game. Do you risk it? If there's no real answer going into Monday night, do you risk it? I don't think so. I think the best play here, honestly, is to grab, Sunday night tight end or Jacob Hollister from Seattle if he's available. This way you have that quick pivot. You want to keep Kittle in your lineup as long as possible until you know more information. So if that gives you till Sunday night at 8:20 and you're still up in the air and maybe you wind up playing, Jason Witten or Irv Smith, I think that's okay. I think it's worth it to wait and maybe sacrifice a few points and hopefully play Kittle than to just replace him with a 1 o'clock Sunday guy, assuming he's not going to play. So for right now, I would hope that Kittle's playing. I would have another tight end on either the Monday night game, whether that's San Francisco's backup or Jacob Hollister in Seattle, or one of the Sunday night guys, and be ready to pivot, kind of last second there. So keep an eye on that. That's pretty dangerous. George Kittle owners have got to be sweating that injury right now. Hopefully it's minor and it's not going to affect him that much. All right, that's going to do it. That is week 10. That's our preview shows. So we got a big week this week. It's not a huge week in amount of games because there's 6 teams on a bye, but it's a huge week for fantasy football. This is a week where you got to separate yourself, right? Maybe you're 7-2. Maybe you're 5-4. Maybe you're 3-6. Either way, now's the time where you're making moves. There's 4 weeks left in most of our fantasy regular seasons, and now's the time. So, go out there, play your best team, do the research, make sure you watch the GOAT, and let's get ready to kick some ass this weekend, all right? Have a great day. Thanks for joining us. Go ahead and find us on Twitter at GOATFF Podcast, at Jim Neander. That's me, your host, Jim Neander. Have a great day. Have a great Sunday. We'll see you next week.